Hello and welcome. Indeed, we do live in interesting times. What you've just been looking at is the cover of the catalogue of the Venice Biennale. The Venice Biennale is one of Europe's premier contemporary art exhibitions. And last year, it happens every 2 years in the lovely city of Venice, the theme was May You Live in Interesting Times. Hardly could the organisers have imagined what they were predicting, because indeed we have been living in the most extraordinary times. It occurred to me that we might just spend 10 minutes thinking about what we've all just been through and what we'd like to emerge from that. Will the future be exactly the same? Very possibly, although we hope not. But let's just take a minute to try and think about what's happened and to cement it, to secure it. I'm very lucky. I can, out of my window, I have a lovely view of trees and flowers and things like that. Other people have not been so lucky, but I think for everybody it's been the most remarkable spring and early summer. Watching the sun bring out first of all the leaves and then the most spectacular blossom that we've had this year. Whether we've been in small flats or in large vicarages, it's been a good time to appreciate nature. And I think the first thing this strange period has done is to give people a new sensitivity to their world. I'll come back to that at the very end. But I asked one or two other people as well from St Lawrence's what they particularly discovered during lockdown and what they hoped would be different afterwards. So first of all, we're going to Peter Charles, who has this to tell us.
I think the thing that I've learned during lockdown is that there are people who, because of their inability to be with us physically in church, have felt excluded from our communities. For many of these people, lockdown has become a spiritual revelation, a reconnection to those lost communities. And now, as we return to church, many fear that the door opened by lockdown will once again close. And I believe that we must do all that we can to ensure that it remains open.
So, Peter found almost as a revelation the fact that by live streaming our services, by broadcasting what we were doing, all kinds of people who were housebound anyway were enabled to join in with their friends at St Lawrence's. For him, he says, this was a revelation. And indeed, I know I've said this before, but all credit to Peter for pioneering our digital ministry in this particularly difficult time and actually discovering how to broadcast on Facebook in the first place, and then how to set about successfully engaging large numbers of people, both at St Lawrence's and all over the place. We get followers from all over the world. Particular thanks to the diocese, who, thanks to a grant, enabled us finally to buy a decent camera with which to do our filming. So for Peter, lockdown was a way of including people who would not normally be included in our worship and in our services, who in the quietness of their home were able to share not only their own prayers, but the prayers of other people as well, coming into their homes. Perhaps it all goes back to that famous passage in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6, which perhaps we'll listen to now.
But when you pray, go to your private room, shut yourself in, and so pray to your Father who is in that secret place, and your Father who sees all that is done in secret will reward you.
We've learned to pray in that secret place, not just on our own, but with other people too. The church has come into our homes, and our homes have become sacred places where the Eucharistic assembly includes us at home as well as those in church. I asked somebody else, I asked Liz Tusu, who is well known as one of the prominent members of the choir, what she'd discovered out of lockdown and what she most hoped for the future. And this is what Liz had to say.
So, in response to the question, what have I learnt? I think I've learnt that you can only live each day at a time, and you really do need to trust in God, because really we have no control ourselves. And what I hope for the future is that we do something about climate change. The clean air in nature has been so wonderful, and I found this prayer very helpful.
Thank you, Liz. It was a lovely prayer, that of St. Francis, which Liz has found, which also reminds us of the Sermon on the Mount, which we've just heard from, but a rather longer passage from Matthew chapter 6. Let's listen to that now in the light of that prayer of St. Francis.
That is why I am telling you not to worry about your life and what you are to eat, nor about your body and what you are to wear. Surely life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Look at the birds in the sky. They do not sow or reap or gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they are? Can any of you, however much you worry, add one single cubit to your span of life? And why worry about clothing? Think of the flowers growing in the fields. They never have to work or spin, yet I assure you that not even Solomon in all his royal robes were clothed like one of these. Now if that is how God clothes the wild flowers growing in the field, which are there today and thrown into the furnace tomorrow, will he not much more look after you, you who have so little faith? So do not worry, and do not say, what are we to eat? What are we to drink? What are we to wear? It is the Gentiles who set their hearts on these things. Your heavenly Father knows you need them all. Set your hearts on his kingdom first, and on God's saving justice, and all these other things will be given you as well.
So that was from St. Matthew chapter 6. And you can see where St. Francis got his inspiration from for the prayer that Liz chose. But there's one other thing that Liz mentioned at the end of her little spiel, that she really hoped that something would happen about climate change as a result of our recent experiences. And I think that's what I'd most like to focus on myself. For a few short weeks, looking back now, everything changed. We realised that we could cope with massive disruption to our everyday lives. There were no riots, no shops were burnt down, no factories went up in smoke. We had some very positive demonstrations about Black Lives Matter, but nothing particularly negative. Unlike previous times, people were remarkably responsible. On the whole, people kept up their social distancing. People did stay at home. Most people didn't go out in larger numbers than they were meant to. We showed actually we are capable of withstanding quite a significant change in our lives. In order to deal with climate change, we are all going to have to accept considerable changes in our daily life. Many of the things which make life comfortable or even acceptable are actually ruining the environment in which we live. Only today I read an article about the Amazon rainforest and how rapidly it's being destroyed, and the completely catastrophic effect that will have upon the climate, not just of the Americas, but of the entire globe. The Amazon rainforest are like the lungs of the planet, and yet we're busy destroying it. And yet, if we're really going to change, we are going to have to make substantial changes in our lives, many of which will be uncomfortable, many of which will be disruptive. This period of lockdown has shown that actually we can cope with quite a bit of disruption. We can do without quite a lot of the things that actually we thought were indispensable. My prayer is that it's been a bit of a dry run, possibly, for what we will need to do in order to avoid catastrophic climate change in our children's lifetimes. And so let's hope these interesting times in which we've all been living may, by the grace of God, give rise to a fairer, cleaner, better, more sustainable world, which we can pass on to our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren as a crisis which we faced and dealt with. Thank you for listening.